Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk.
Hi. G'day.
G'day.
I didn't even attempt an accent, just g'day.
Somebody in Australia was like, I wish I loved anything as much as Americans love fall.
That is like, very reasonable.
Right.
That is very reasonable. Yesterday was not particularly cool.
No.
Yesterday was fair. I mean, it wasn't 90, but it was like 85, 87. I was out. I can't remember where the hell I was, but I saw a woman. Don't get me wrong. She looked lovely. Her outfit was extremely well put together. She's very cute. Probably mid-20s. But she was wearing like brown tights and boots and either a long sweater or a short dress, whatever, short knit dress. And it looked great, but I just looked at her and I was like, I am schwitzen just looking at this.
I bet she's gotten her pumpkin spice and everything, and that's great for her.
I do have a few little Halloween things out. And you have Halloween things out?
Do I?
Well, your husband does.
More than the normal?
Yes, he has big pumpkin-y things
the
out.
pumpkins.
I pulled it and I was like, yay! There's pumpkins. And
he had to have done that today.
well, he's out there doing stuff. So
oh, okay.
He's probably like, my God, MB is weird.
No, he likes it when people like his decorations. Makes him happy.
I was like, it is never too early. I am so glad you are doing this.
My son, though, was like, why is Halloween stuff in the stores? And I was like, I suppose for the same reason that Christmas stuff will be in there next month. And he was like, but I want the warm to stay a little longer. And I'm like, it's fall in Colorado. The warm will be here randomly.
Oh, yeah.
It's fine.
Oh, yeah.
But I was like, honestly, it still gets less shelf time than Christmas. So
yes.
Soon it's just going to be the whole year. There's Christmas shut out. We actually have a Manitou, a Christmas store. So
yes. And there is a store called The Christmas Store.
Yeah.
That's a chain.
It's in Estes Park and it's all over the place. And it might be the chain one in Manitou.
I don't know. I don't believe I've been in. But almost every tourist town has a Christmas store where you can go in and buy. But we started doing when we travel, and I don't mean, well, when we jetted off to Fiji. I mean, when we go to, Kansas, we buy something as a tree ornament, but it's like a bottle opener. It's a luggage tag. They're not meant to be Christmas tree ornaments, but there's something that we like, and it symbolizes something about our weirdness on that trip. So, yeah.
Like Disney always has Christmas ornaments at their stores and stuff. Oh, yeah. So when we've gotten them, because then you get the year and you get that you went to Disney and all that stuff. I'm not sure we're going to Disney ever again, but we went there a few times.
We've got a couple Disney ornaments on the tree. Yeah, I think. Not like the tree is up, so I have nothing to bring to mind. I know we own a couple of Disney ornaments.
Yeah.
So, and we also, very much pre the movie, had a couple of Barbie ornaments. Because I don't know where they came from. Huh. One is a big, indestructible plastic ball. It's a Barbie. I don't know where it came from. I don't know.
That's funny.
Don't you have shit in your house that you go, where the hell did this come from?
All the time. Like, we had started trying to do, like, a Hallmark one every year. Excuse me. Every year. And we wanted to get each person, like, their own Hallmark one. And they got so expensive. And unfortunately, they used to be really good quality. And then they started getting cheaper and cheaper. And so we have, like, a couple broken ones in there that we still put up because they still work or whatever. And some we've thrown away. So we kind of shut that down. Do
you hang a pickle on your tree?
I sure don't. Why would I do that?
There is some, I can't even remember if it's German or Dutch, or I don't remember, but it's a tradition to hang a pickle ornament on your tree. And whoever finds the pickle ornament is the king of Christmas. I don't know. They have good luck. They won't get psoriasis.
I've seen pickle ornaments and wondered why on earth.
I have a pickle ornament. I don't know where it came from because obviously it's not part of my cultural heritage. I I'm like, look, we have a pickle. We had some good friends who used to spend Christmas with us, so they always brought the girls. Sometimes they brought us an ornament, but they always brought the girls 2 ornaments. So there's all these ornaments where in tiny fine point Sharpie, I wrote the girl's name and the year on it. Mm-hmm. So I could at some point pull them out and say, here, take your ornaments.
My mom had started doing that a little bit there then. So like I had a couple ornaments that were mine.
I don't know if I have anything from, I don't think I have anything from my child. I think my sister inherited all of those. And
well, the only one I know for sure was from that. I have a Garfield one because I loved Garfield and I loved the little comic books that they had because they had those little rectangular, like half-sized ones. I loved those.
I love those.
Yeah. So Garfield. I love Garfield. We really had a lot of the same attitude in some ways.
Whereas I had a Bugs Bunny ornament. That is who I identify with. That is my cartoon characters, Bugs Bunny.
That's okay. I see. I always did like Bugs Bunny too. I also loved Marvin the Martian.
Yes.
And Joffrey was the Taz guy. It's all covered. Nobody loves Daffy Duck.
Well, except I do love the one where he keeps getting shot and his beak ends up in different places on his head. Yeah. I do love that. That still makes me laugh.
Oh, I didn't hate Daffy Duck. It's just, I don't know that anybody identifies with Daffy Duck. Or frankly, his temper, I really should identify with Daffy Duck.
Or Elmer Fudd. Does anyone identify with Elmer Fudd?
I don't think so. Again, Yosemite Sam's temper right there.
Rootin' tootin' wreckin' freckin'. Yep.
I liked the big chicken.
Foghorn Leghorn. Yes. Oh
with
my
his
God, the big chicken.
accent.
Oh my, yes, that was the best part. Now, in real life, we've all met men like that, and we hate them. But somehow... watching like a thing with him as an adult, though, and I was like, he's a dick. Yeah, he is.
He's not a good creature, animal, whatever. That to like kids to like, but I didn't notice that when I was a kid for sure.
As I get older, the more I identify with Wile E.
Coyote. I was about to say, and I was like, the Roadrunner's also a jerk.
Yeah,
just like Tom and Jerry. It's the same thing. He usually wasn't just keeping to himself. Mm-hmm. Sylvester and Tweety.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Granny.
Yeah, they're completely different as an adult than they were.
At some point now, I need to dress up as Granny for Halloween.
I saw that at Dragon Con, the Roper showed up, the Mrs. Roper.
I saw that.
Yeah. I want to join this community.
I have a Mrs. Roper costume. I don't have the curly wig.
I just have this hair.
You have the hair, I have the caftan and the jewelry.
That's right. So I'm gonna need, I bought a caftan recently.
Ooh.
It's not flattering at all, and I love it.
Is it it's like a 70s?
No, it might even kind of have either an Asian or like a Hawaiian vibe, perhaps. I mean, I just liked it because it was turquoise and black.
That's fine.
And it was super soft, like silky type material instead of the cotton. So, but literally it's 2 rectangles. Like if you lay it out flat, it's 2 rectangles taken in at the waist a little bit. And that's it. It's a rectangle that you're wearing. And I was like, this is fascinating.
I love a caftan.
Yeah. I saw it on there and I had it on my wish list forever on Amazon. And I was like, I'm going to look ridiculous in this, but I still kind of want it. And I kept looking at it and I kept looking at it. And I was like, just buy the stupid thing. And then I bought it. And I've only worn it once because my laundry has been sitting there for weeks. Because I've been under a stressful deadline that has just locked me down in other ways. Like, I can't do the other things, even if I'm not doing this at this moment.
Yep.
So my house is a mess. And it took me probably an hour to fold and put away all that laundry last night.
Oh, my God.
I was not happy.
I finally had to do laundry because I was getting to the point of running out of underwear. Yes, I will share that. And so I take it downstairs one night. Put it in the laundry. And then I'm mad because I'm watching a TV show that I've never seen before. It's a series. It's a British series. Although I believe the main character is Irish. And I realize that either I can turn up the TV so loud that it hurts, or I cannot understand half of what's being said.
Yeah.
So I was just sitting there in a pissed off mood because of that. But then I forgot. I went to bed before the laundry finished, so I didn't throw it in the dryer. And I forgot about it the next day. And it was a
Oh.
hot day. And our washer is situated where it does get the sun in the morning. So I went in and I opened that and I went, nope, got to run that again.
I don't know how long it had to have sat there. It was summer. It was one of the row homes that we lived in. You know, it might have been the only row home we lived in. But anyway, one of our rentals among many. And by CSCS, actually.
Oh.
Back behind there off Mallow. Anyway, it actually all mildewed. Like, it didn't just go sour. It mildewed. I think it was the middle of summer because I know one of the things I lost was this super cute little, like, mini that I could wear at the time. And, you know, and it was like this light turquoisey almost, but lighter aqua color. And it was never right after that. I had to throw it away because even after rewashing it, I threw it in the dryer because I didn't have time and the mildew wasn't gone. So it had actually stained it. Yeah. Yuck. That was bad.
I hate it when that happens. And in the winter you can get away with it because you just can. I mean, you can't leave it in there for days.
Right.
I have discovered. Long time ago I discovered that. Yeah.
Yeah, I learned it at that time. That was when I learned it. I learned a lot of things in that row house. There's a lot of things I could tell stories about and just point to my time in that house. But that was also where I learned that when you give your notice in an apartment that you send it registered mail.
Oh.
Yeah. Or they screw you. Oh, we didn't get it until after, so it hasn't been a month's notice, so you don't get your deposit back. Yeah, we turned it in on time with our rent. And then I tried to, she was canny. She'd been through this before.
Oh, yeah.
She had waited to deposit our check, too, that I'd sent with it. So that I could not prove that she deposited that check in time. So.
All you had was the date on the check, and you can write any date you want on a check.
Absolutely. Yeah. We should have gone after her, but at that time we were like 21, maybe 20. Mm-hmm. So we figured, no. That's when you don't. I was telling somebody who was going through, she's younger, going through stuff with a landlord. And she was like, I don't know if I should just fight and give it up. And I told her, you know what? One of my biggest regrets is that I never went after any of those fuckers. Mm-hmm. They found a way to screw us every single time.
Yep.
No matter what. I got better and better and better at everything. I made checklists. I took photos. I dated it.
Nikki's.
Didn't matter.
Nikki's, when she moved out of her apartment. They fucked her over.
Yeah.
And at one point I looked at her and I was like, how much was your security deposit? And she said $300. And I said, whatever you don't get back, I'll just make up.
Yeah.
Because I'm just fucking sick of this. And they did charge her for stuff that you legally can't charge for.
Uh-huh. That's the thing. They get away with it because they know people aren't willing
if you're
to
moving,
the expense.
Yes. And you have a lot of shit going on when you're moving.
And honestly, anybody who's renting is probably working their asses off all the time. That was our thing, too. I was like, when can we afford to go to court? How much work would we miss? Mm-hmm. It's not worth it. And they know that, and that's why they get away with it. In this entire country, this shit happens all the time.
Yes.
But then I've also known people who rent stuff out, and they get screwed over repeatedly in other ways, and then they become these people, I guess. So
I will say, Lucy had a good situation when she moved out of her apartment. Because I said, she found a new apartment. She wanted to move so she could have a cat. Because she couldn't have any pets in her old apartment. So she found an apartment and it's I've seen it. It's very nice. I really like the carport. It's not a long row of carport. They're duplexes. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit nicer. And I said, did you tell her, I don't know if he owns the place or if he's the manager or what. I said, did you tell Mike you're moving out? No, I haven't told him yet. I said, sweetie, I think you have to give him 30 days.
Yeah.
So she called him and he's like, yeah, I like you a lot, but you have to give me 30 days. So she ended up paying rent for an extra month. Mm-hmm. But it meant that she got moved into the new place and she just went back after work and worked on the old place. And he didn't even inspect. She's like, okay, Mike, I'm ready for you to inspect it. And he's like, I'm not going to inspect your apartment. I'm just going to give you the deposit back.
Wow.
Small town.
Yeah.
I mean, small town in Kansas. So he was very, but her in the middle of all this. And of course, it's hot as fuck in this part of Kansas. The AC at her old apartment died. Mm. So she had to wait a few days so they could come in and fix the air conditioner. Because she's like, I can't go in there when it's 110 and clean. And I said, no matter what you do, it will be at least as clean, if not cleaner, than when you moved in.
Right.
Because I'm like, there was crud in the... No. It wasn't filthy. It just was not up to my standard of cleanliness. And I'm a fucking slob. So I don't have white glove, standards.
Yeah. I always clean in and going out. Yes.
Yeah.
Your turn.
All right. Shall I begin?
Yes.
Okay. So this one is a head scratcher. Because it came across very much, when I started researching this, it all comes across one way. And then I don't always do this, but I went and looked on Reddit. Because sometimes you get local people weighing in on different aspects. And they threw a whole new kind of light on the subject. So I'll include that at the end. Yes. So, this is August of 2017. I know I do. I either do stuff that happened yesterday or 400 years ago. And in the next couple of weeks, I have one coming up that's, 600.
And I'm like, here's the 80s and 90s and the 70s. I'll probably do like that whole little chunk right there.
So it's August of 2017. And Jenna VanGelderen was 25 years old, young woman. She was only 4'11", weighed about 140 pounds. She's a very pretty girl, dark hair, dark eyes. There's lots of pictures of her. So one of the sources for this, hold on. You're going to be like, you don't usually talk so much about what she looks like. There was a documentary on Oxygen. So I watched that to get the basics down.
So you saw a lot of her.
So I saw a lot of her and her parents. Mom looks a little like Rhea Perlman.
Interesting.
So
that is why she's short.
Yes. Okay, so she was described as a child as being precocious and smart, always smiling. She had what was called a nonverbal learning disability. And I did not look that up to see exactly what the hell that meant.
Nonverbal. I mean, it means something different in each thing. So I don't know. Like my son was considered nonverbal gifted. And I was like, he talks, because I'd worked with autistic kids who were well and truly nonverbal. And they're like, no, wait.
And there was never anything about her not talking, because as a result of her disability, and later, like the year before this happens, it was in 2016, she was diagnosed as being high functioning on the autism scale.
Okay.
So her thing was, when she was a kid and when she grew up, and it put people off, she asked a lot of questions. Whatever situation she was in, she asked a lot of questions. And her mom said she was always seeking clarification. She wanted to know exactly what the parameters were. She wanted... So I get that. I'm like,
that makes sense. That jives. So with the gifted, the nonverbal basically was about how they could put their own thoughts into speaking. They were like, your son, here's how they explained it to me. Because again, I was like, he absolutely isn't. He talks all the time. And, but they were like, okay, your son could look at a diagram, say, architecture diagram or a diagram of a complicated shape or something like that. And he could put it together in his head. Right? But he cannot stand up and tell us about the book he just read in a thorough fashion and break it down. And he could do it in writing, but he couldn't do it.
Gotcha.
And he didn't like to, though. So, yeah, I never really understood it because I already had a definition of nonverbal in my head.
Well, at one point, when Lucy was in the 3rd grade, I was told she had to be put on an individual learning plan. And I looked at the teacher. I did not say what the fuck, but I'm sure it was all over my face. Because, I'm like, why? And he goes, okay, here's the test that she took. And the problem was she thought too far ahead. Like she was reading too much into the question and giving too advanced of an answer. So she was getting the questions wrong.
Okay.
And he goes, so technically we're supposed to put her on an ILP. I said, don't waste your time. She doesn't need it. You got some kids in this class who need a little extra boost. Spend your time with it. And he's like, yeah, Lucy does not. We're aware. She does not need.
So weird. Yeah, I know. It's just school bullshit.
Yeah. Let's spend 90% of our time the kids are in school testing them. Let's not teach them. And it's not the teachers. Don't get me wrong. No, it is not the teachers
the ones
who
that
want
are just... But that's kind of like... And again, I understand a lot of people are anti-cop. But it's the same sort of principle of acting like the cops created the laws. They didn't. And
No.
believe me, sometimes they think they are stupid as fuck.
Yep.
But they can get in trouble if they don't do it. So they gotta, same things.
So, Jenna began having social difficulties when she was in middle school. Well, who the fuck didn't? I mean, there are some...
No, middle school was great.
There are some spoiled little princesses who don't appear to have a hard time in middle school because they're busy making everybody else fucking miserable.
That's right.
Anyway, she wanted desperately to have friends, but she was a little bit quirky, and her constant questioning kept other people from wanting to be close to her. A childhood friend who was interviewed in this documentary agreed with Jenna's parents and said that Jenna was eager to please and wanted friendship so badly that she was inclined to let people take advantage of her. And we get that. We've all seen that scenario. So as she grew up, she kept certain elements of her life secret from her parents because she interpreted their caution as disapproval of her friends. So, and then, less than a year before this takes place, she had been diagnosed on the high functioning end of the autism spectrum. And her family said that sticking to her routines was very important to her. Get that? That tracks. Mm-hmm. So, this is a day in August. Her parents, Roseanne Glick and Leon VanGelderen, were leaving town for a trip to Canada. They had asked Jenna to come over and house sit for them because they had this. There's a picture of this cat. It is the big, fluffy, fat-ass cat. It was an elderly cat with diabetes that needed special attention. So, and it was 21. So they'd been with the family since she was a toddler. So will you come over and take care of the cat? Needs to be fed on a schedule. And it was either a vet or a vet tech coming in to give it insulin. By the way, giving cat insulin, very easy to do. We had to.
So did they wanted us to do it. I feel like we said no.
It had to go under the skin, didn't have to go in a muscle. Mm-hmm. So we just put the food down and picked the back of and just...
Yeah, and that's how they told us to do it. I just don't remember if we did it or not.
Fair.
It would have been my husband. He had to inject his dad all the time as a kid, so...
That's a little bit different.
And then me during IVF.
That's a whole different story. So, 10:30 p.m. on August 18th, Jenna left the house to meet up with friends. And I read that and I went, youth.
Yeah.
10:30 p.m. I would have to put pants on. I'm not leaving the house. I mean, if there's an emergency, yes. But at 1:15 a.m., she returned home, called a friend, and they chatted for a while. At 2:15 a.m., she texts a friend that she's ready to lie down, which everybody's kind of narrowed in on that because she didn't say, I'm ready for bed. I'm tired. She said, I'm ready to lie down. Or she may have said lay down, but it's just kind of an odd
She may or may
phrasing.
not have been grammatically correct.
Yes. So the next morning, the vet or vet tech, who is a friend of the family, comes by to give the cat its scheduled insulin shot. Nobody answers the door. So the vet calls Jenna's brother, Will, who comes over and lets him in. The lights are on and the TV is on, but Jenna is nowhere to be found. The cat hasn't been fed. So they're like, well, she wasn't here this morning. So they feed the cat, give it the shot. And Will starts looking for Jenna and can't find her. So he reaches out to her parents. They start calling her friends and nobody has heard from her. So she's reported missing the next day, August 20th. And the parents immediately flew home. What they found at their home disturbed them. Her everyday sneakers, so apparently she wore these sneakers every day. They were still on the floor right next to the couch where she kicked them off every time she came over. Her green cell phone charger was there and it was still plugged in. And she had a plastic grocery bag that she carried her toiletry items with her everywhere she went. And that was on the counter in the bathroom. So her makeup was in there, her deodorant was in there, and her earwax removal kit was in there. They had a picture. And I was like, what's that box? It's an earwax. I'm like, that's an odd thing to carry about. But I guess you never know when you're going to want to flush out your earwax. Okay, besides Jenna, there were several things missing. Her purse, her phone, her suitcase, and her little blue Mazda were all gone. And here's the thing that throws everybody off. The family had these 3 hand-stitched Egyptian tapestries that were approximately 5 foot tall and 2 feet wide in size. They were framed and mounted in the living room. So the tapestries were purchased around World War II, weren't of any great monetary value. They're not something collectors are clamoring over. They had sentimental value for the family. Mm-hmm. So one of the frames had been removed from the wall. The glass was broken and the tapestry had been removed through the hole in the glass. So in the documentary I watched, it was obvious that her parents were still shaken, as you would expect. Mm-hmm. Roseanne said they blamed themselves. They blamed each other. The family does not believe that she would have just left voluntarily without contacting them.
Or without her things that she always had.
Yes. A few months before she vanished, she started hanging out with a crowd that her father said was taking advantage of her. She had her first full-time job at a pet store, and she was fired for stealing $3,000. Now, this was over time in small amounts. It was like $75 here, $105 there. It was all in that vicinity. And her father believes, her new friends convinced her that they needed the money and asked her to steal it for them. So because
a hallmark of autism is being taken advantage of.
Her parents said this, and her friend from childhood said yes. She took people at face value. Whatever they said to her, she believed, which I get that. Her phone was on her parents' plan. So her father was able to access all of her phone records. So he started investigating her friends and then would confront her with what he had learned about them. Jenna was furious at the breach in her privacy, and she moved out. So although she stayed in frequent contact with her parents, her mom said she talked to them every day. She and Jenna talked every day. She did not tell them where she had moved.
No.
She also got a second phone for herself, telling her friends that her father was monitoring her through her original phone. I get that. So after her disappearance, her family was able to get some records from that second phone as well. Not actual who called, but some form of records. They were also able to get copies of her chats and Facebook postings because she had shared her passwords with her brother. Mm. Interesting note, he was not interviewed in the documentary. Although apparently they were fairly close. On the night that she disappeared, someone was pressuring her to go back to her apartment that night, but there's no way to figure out who that person was.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know why, but also that second phone that she had for herself pinged at 7:15 and 7:45 a.m. on the 19th. So she disappeared, what did I say? The 18th. On the night of the 18th. So it was the very next morning, that phone pinged. And despite what TV tells us, you can't really ping a phone and see exactly where it is. You just get a general area.
For the tower or whatever.
Yeah, you get the area near the closest tower. Unless you have Find My Phone, unless somebody has, you can set it up so your friends or your family can track your phone. That was not what happened here. The area where it pinged was in Fairburn, Georgia, where I am so butthurt about Fairburn, but that's different.
What?
That's a whole different... I'll tell you later.
Okay.
I'll tell you at the end. So the area where it pinged was Fairburn, Georgia, which is right outside of Atlanta. It's in a heavily wooded and densely overgrown area that covers several hundred acres. They're showing this, and I'm like, this is right outside of Atlanta? Because it does. It's all foresty and shit. So the officials searched, and the family went with them twice when they were using canine units, but there was nothing ever found. But you cannot search an area of that size thoroughly. Mm-mm. It's just absolutely impossible. So 2 weeks later, on September 5th, Jenna's car was found in or on DeFore Place in Atlanta. The seat had been pushed way back, indicating possibly that Jenna hadn't driven it there. She's 4'11", so she didn't need the seat back that far. The car was unlocked. Her purse, suitcase, and glasses were inside. Some items were scattered around inside the car, and the exterior of the car was covered in leaves and debris. No usable evidence was found inside the car. Although they did find a phone charger that did not belong to either of her phones. Like, man, people be leaving their phone chargers everywhere. But you can get one at Walgreens.
Anywhere.
The great
Airport.
gas station. Yeah. To confuse the issue even further, a young man came forward claiming to be Jenna's boyfriend. He said he had been at her parents' house that night and they had broken up. He also stated that Jenna was heavily into drugs and was a prostitute. I don't feel I can comment on whether someone could or could not conceal something that big from their family. Because I feel like they could.
If they couldn't find evidence afterwards of it, or somebody who could
yeah.
Okay.
There was no anecdote. The police did not find any anecdotal evidence to support that she either used drugs or was a prostitute. There would have been something in her home if she was regularly using drugs. Yes, one would think. I mean,
probably in her little case that she carried everywhere. Right?
It was a bag.
Like a pipe or a syringe. I mean, depending on what kind of drugs they're claiming.
Yes. So then there was Jenna's male roommate. I found it very interesting in the documentary and in the articles I read. They did not mention the name of the alleged boyfriend because nobody was backing this up. It was just his word, and they did not mention the name of the roommate. They did say that both of these people were cleared of suspicion, but I still found it interesting they never mentioned their name. He allowed the police to see Jenna's room, but didn't let them search the apartment. There was no bedding in it.
And they couldn't get a warrant?
They didn't get a warrant. There's a difference. So there was no bedding in it. He said when Jenna stayed there, she slept on the floor with no pillows and no blankets. Her parents didn't believe him and are outraged. Yeah, outraged that the police didn't get a warrant to search the entire apartment. There is some speculation that she was just sleeping with the male roommate.
Right.
Which kind of makes sense. I'm like, really? If she's a person of habit, if her habits and her routines are important to her, I can't imagine her just going, well, I'm going to lay down on the bare floor here and sleep.
No.
So I'm thinking she was sleeping with a roommate, but I do not know that. Fast forward to, it just dead ends. There are no leads. On July 18th of 2019, DeKalb police confirmed that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and the FBI have taken over the investigation. On August 29th, 2021, her family held a memorial service for her and began proceedings to have her legally declared dead. So some questions have come up during the investigation into her disappearance. Apparently, the DeKalb police, it's DeKalb County, DeKalb police never questioned the parents' neighbors or canvassed the neighborhood, which would seem logical. What had you seen her coming and going, but they didn't do that. It was also discovered that Jenna had been making Western Union money transfers since 2015, although they can't tell how much money total was sent or who it went to. So it could be that the DeKalb police didn't push very hard because they believe this is an adult woman who left her overprotective parents of her own free will.
Okay, but again, knowing autism as I do, there are things that don't support that. That would be very hard on her, like not having her comfort item.
Yes.
My daughter has to take her quilt with her when we travel.
Yeah. Because
that's the only quilt that she can sleep with. An entire quilt. It needs its own suitcase. To be very clear, if there is an item, we had to desperately scramble when she was a baby, before we knew that she was autistic, because she had a lovey, and she had loved that thing to death. It was gross. It had basically mildewed, because she would suck on the ears.
Oh, yeah.
It was a little hippo. It was adorable. It was very soft, and it was like a hippo with a little blanket on the bottom of it, but not like to fully cover you.
Right.
And it was a whole thing, and we ended up finding several more, and I tried to give them to her. It doesn't work because the smell is also familiar, so we had to rub it on the nasty one, right? Which is kind of counter to what we were trying, but that is what we had to do. It was a whole thing, and she is not... Well, see, I am having trouble knowing how to say this anymore because the other day she said, I'm glad that they got rid of Asperger's as a diagnosis. Yeah. And she said that nobody should be saying high functioning or low functioning or level this or level that because that's what they say now. Level 1. She said, I am not different than my autistic peers. I am not better than my autistic peers. We are
Okay.
just autistic. So I'm trying to internalize that now, but sometimes it's very hard to explain something if you can't use any
Yes.
of that verbiage.
And I will say, I'm using the verbiage that the documentary
Yes. And this is just, I'm like, I have to watch then. Like, I'm trying to learn how to say it and not set those aside, because in my head it matters, but to her it doesn't, so.
Yes.
But like, that is somebody who is not deeply, who could live on their own.
Yes, I want to point out that this woman was able to she completed an associate's degree in business.
My daughter just scored, what was it, 94th percentile on her PSATs. Like,
she got herself a phone. She got herself a place to stay. She obviously was able to do these things.
Yes. But there are things that I get that she could. She had the ability, to make off with somebody, but there are things that do not support that. And honestly, the police should have been looking at her. She should have been considered missing at risk.
Yes.
And instead, they blew it off and they didn't fully look into it. And so probably a murderer has gotten away with something.
I'll come up to what some of the plans are. There was a whole thing about the tapestry. I started going down that rabbit hole. Some relatives saw one online and they called the parents, oh my God, this is for sale on, I don't know, eBay or wherever. When they investigated, they learned it was an identical tapestry, but not the one from the house. So a lot of people on Reddit want to say that the tapestry was stolen to wrap her body in it, to remove it from the house. And I'm like,
but there would have been
bedding
it's
not
somewhere.
Big enough. Yes, they're in an entire house of bedding,
Shower
blankets,
curtain, quilt,
rugs. Yeah. And this was, I also want to say, this was not like a nice middle class neighborhood. This was a fucking rich neighborhood.
Oh.
So they had shit in their house. I mean, for God's sake, an Afghan. But so I realized she was 4'11" and the tapestry was 5 foot tall, but it was only 2 feet wide.
Yeah.
She was not a tiny little pencil thin.
No, 140. When I got married, I was 120 pounds, 5'8.5" or whatever, so she wasn't a beanpole.
Yeah. So nor could they have wrapped it the other way, because she would have stuck out both ends.
Yeah.
So I'm like, no, this was not, stop it.
And chances are, if she'd been murdered and there was blood, I mean, they would have found,
Yes. That's the thing. There's been no blood found, and they've hired people to look into this. So there's no evidence of violence at the house. But there's also been no word from Jenna in the 6 years she's been missing. The evidence is very confusing. The parents believe fully that the police didn't do their job. Somebody pointed out, what if they found Jenna and she said,
I don't want them to know.
I don't want them to know where I am. Then they can't.
I'm not buying it.
I'm not saying that's what happened, but what somebody pointed out was, what somebody suggested was, maybe her plan was to run away, and somebody helped her leave. And a
conspirator.
And then
took advantage.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So it's unclear. The documentary clearly leans into the missing, taken point of view. But I think it's even sadder to think that she planned to leave and then got taken advantage of.
Yes.
So, my sources on this were Medium, the Oxygen documentary, Facebook, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and Reddit. And there is still a Facebook page. If anybody wants to look at it, they still have the Facebook page going, and ask if anybody hears anything, if anybody says, because I can't help thinking, if the police had canvassed the neighborhood, somebody had to have seen something.
Yeah. I feel like they know. I agree that they didn't do their job.
And it kind of fits the fact that the car was covered in debris and that phone pinged in the forest. Like, it sounds like they drove there and could have dumped her out and tossed the phone and then drove the car and dumped that somewhere else.
Yeah. Yep.
So
sad.
So what you got?
I'm doing a 2-parter again.
Look at you.
Because they're related. But not. So you might be surprised. So anyway, I'm doing Waco. The Waco Siege, or as some call it, the Waco Massacre. Mm-hmm. And David, hi. Like, you never do this when we're recording.
This is our 149th episode, and she has never gotten on your desk.
Nope. You don't get to walk over the keyboard. You know better. Come here. All right. That would be my elder cat joining us. Okay. Because this one's long. Now she's mad. In February of 1993, an incident, see how you know 70s, 80s, 90s, an incident occurred that would trigger a 51-day siege and a massive loss of life that would inspire a later terrorist attack on American soil and paint the FBI as a joke in the public eye. This event had been simmering for a while and was born from violence to begin with. This is long because I needed to give a little background because there were things that I had no idea about, and so I want to put them out there.
You have to set the scene.
Yes. So to really start this story, I have to take you in the Wayback Machine.
How far back are we going?
Well, not as far as you would go, but a religious group called the Branch Davidians was formed in 1955 after a schism in a group called the Shepherd's Rod, which was an American branch of an international group called, and you've heard of them, I'm sure, the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
I'm pretty sure when I was growing up, we called them the Holy Rollers.
Sounds about right.
There was a Seventh-day Adventist church in my little tiny...
Yeah, and I think that's the group that's in Loloma that's pretty famous because it's such a large group of them in Loloma. But
Okay.
They were actually on a documentary I'm watching about the blue zones where people live longer.
Okay.
So the founder of the Shepherd's Rod, a.k.a. the Davidians, they were called the Davidians, was a man named Victor Houteff, who had been excommunicated from the Seventh-day Adventist Church in 1930. The Davidians were an apocalyptic cult who believed that Jesus Christ would return to take on Babylon and its armies. They had land in Axtell, Texas, which is 13 miles northeast of Waco. I just thought it was funny. None of this happened in Waco. Just FYI. It was not actually in Waco. It was in Axtell, which they had named Mount Carmel Center Ranch. Victor died in 1955. I'm reading over a label here. Because this got printed out on labels
This got printed out really whack.
His legacy passed on to his wife and then a man named Benjamin Roden, who also died, once more leaving the cult to his wife, who felt her son George wasn't fit, nor was he a prophet. So she instead picked a man, handpicked.
I think George dodged a bullet there.
Oh, wait. No, there's more.
God.
A man named Vernon Wayne Howell as the next prophet.
Burn!
But we know him as David Koresh. His real name, Vernon Wayne Howell. He was born on August 17th, 1959, a Houston, Texas native. His father was a pathetic perv who had knocked up Bonnie Sue Clark when he was 20 years old. 20 years old. I don't know how old she was when she got knocked up, but she was 14 when Vernon was born.
Ooh.
And since he was born in August, I'm saying she was 13. But his father, Bobby Wayne Howell, had absconded with a different teenage girl before then, so Bonnie moved in with an alcoholic abuser. This is a real tight summary here. His childhood was rocky, with him changing hands from mother to grandmother and back again much later. He dropped out of high school partially due to bullying and issues with dyslexia, and at 19 he got in trouble for impregnating a 15-year-old girl. Texas. Like father, like son. From what I can tell, he didn't take care of that child, instead moving on to become a born-again Christian in the Southern Baptist Church.
Yeehaw.
He decided that the good Lord wanted him to have a relationship with the pastor's 12-year-old daughter. The pastor disagreed. And
Good going, Dad.
I know, right? And he was kicked out of the congregation.
Good.
Which led him to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. This led to him joining the Branch Davidians near Waco at the age of 22. Lois's son wasn't happy about David taking over. George Roden scraped together enough of his fellow cultists that they were able to accost Koresh and chase him off the property at gunpoint. Along with Koresh, over 20 followers went with him. He was known to be a charismatic person who was good at listening and was fascinating to listen to. I just found it so funny. He went from being this bully child to suddenly this charismatic young 20-something.
I can see the connection, though, because if you don't want to be, if you charm your abuser, in some situations, if you charm your parents or your guardians or whoever, you make them laugh.
That's why they added fawn to fight, flight, freeze.
Yes.
Or fawn, right? Because it is a defense mechanism. They found a small property in Palestine, Texas, and lived a very rustic lifestyle, like camping.
Ew.
for several years. I think it was at
Oh.
least 2 years, during which time Koresh was traveling and gathering more members. He went to Australia and Israel and all these places. In Israel, he told them he was a modern-day Cyrus. So just really quickly, Cyrus the Great was a Persian who forged a major empire and freed the Jews. Basically, in a nutshell. He claimed that he would be martyred, ultimately coming to believe he was the second coming of Christ.
Alrighty then.
Yep. He had increasingly gathered more followers, including those who were loyal to him from the Axtell location, and in 1987, things reached a head. George exhumed a body, and Koresh claimed he had challenged him to resurrect the person. Whoever could resurrect a body would be the new leader. I mean, these people are really extremists.
They dug up a body?
Well, they were burying their people on their own property.
And they had a resurrection off.
Well, he wanted to. Allegedly. George denied he had done any such thing, said he was simply moving the body. And I'm like, why are you moving the body, though? Like, why?
I'm having...
I think he did what Koresh claimed he did.
I want to make a really bad Weekend at Bernie's
I know.
comment, but I will refrain. So, for all of our younger listeners, like Thing 1 and Thing 2, just watch Weekend at Bernie's. It's a movie.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Koresh tried going to the police to report him for abuse of a corpse, but they required proof. So Koresh and 7 of his followers armed themselves and went to the Carmel Center to get that proof. Instead, they got into a gunfight, and they did wound George. Police showed up and arrested David and his followers, but they were acquitted. Koresh getting a mistrial. The others were acquitted. He got a mistrial. Despite George threatening to give members of the court STDs if they found against him. Soon after, these people are batshit crazy. That's why I wanted to include this stuff.
I mean, what? How was he?
I don't know. Like, I just covered a cult that put shit on food and doorknobs and stuff. Like, he was going to rub some syphilis on some doorknobs.
I'm going to rub my pecker on your doorknobs.
Yeah.
I'm going to come in and touch myself with your toothbrush. I don't know.
Nothing is normal about these people. Soon after, George murdered a man who thought he would be the next. The guy went to him and said, I actually think I'm the next Messiah. Like, sorry. So he killed him. Are you ready for how he killed him? With an axe.
Oh!
He tried to say...
It's a good Sunday if we
an
have
axe to the head. He tried to say Koresh had sent the man to kill him, but George was found insane and locked up in a psych hospital.
Good.
George did not have the je ne sais quoi of Koresh. And that very much worked against him when he was fighting a guy who was charismatic, because those charismatic people also have charisma to a jury, a judge, a cop.
They speak well.
Yes.
They endear themselves.
Yes. He hadn't been paying the taxes on the Axtell property, so Koresh and his people raised the money to pay it off and took it over. So he is back now.
Where's Mom?
It didn't say, like, when she died or what, but she was for Koresh, remember? She didn't want George to be in charge.
I'm just like, was she living with her son during this? Or it's just idle curiosity.
It was in 1990 that David Koresh became his legal name. He had chosen the name after King David, biblical, and Koresh, which was the name for Cyrus in the Bible.
Huh.
Koresh, still a pervert, released the doctrine of the House of David, which stated that 24 children would be born of Koresh and chosen women, though all women in the sect belonged to him. Didn't mean he was sleeping with them all. This, as well as other issues he had with violence, led to allegations by ex-members of the sect about child abuse and statutory rape, as at least one of the women he took as a wife was underage. He was able to duck these allegations as there was no real proof, though child survivors who are now adults say punishment was constant and they felt they couldn't do anything right. A mother being interviewed said she beat her child until he bled because that's what she'd been ordered to do, and that Koresh used a wooden paddle for small infractions, like if you spilled your milk was the example she gave.
Oh my God.
Then they would be paddled severely. And that if a mother had too close a bond with her child and he felt that they had a better bond than he did, he would take them away and give them to another mother.
Oh, hell no.
That just like the passivity of people in a cult is insane to me. He would ultimately have at least 14 children with these women. His youngest bride, who would later testify in court about her molestation, was 10 years old at the time.
Oh, Jesus.
Part of the doctrine of the House of David made it so that couples in the sect had to separate, the women now belonging to Koresh and the men forced into celibacy. His right-hand man, an educated man named Steve Schneider, also gave up his wife, who had a child with Koresh. like otherwise intelligent humans is the point I was making there.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, though, there had been solo properties on the acreage, like people moved. There was a big flocking there because 1959, I think one of the wives was like, oh, the end of the world is coming in 1959. Everybody move here. And they sold all their shit off. They did what you see with other cults. Everyone ended up living in a central compound that was built and added onto over the years. As pieces of the property were sold off and other buildings taken down, they would reuse the materials and build on to this big main complex. They were down to 77 acres, but I couldn't find what the original acreage was, just that they had sold off acreage.
Well, that's not small.
That's not small. In May of 1992, a UPS driver reported to the local sheriff's office that a box he delivered to the compound had broken open, and inside were grenades. The sheriff called the ATF to alert them. The ATF started an undercover investigation that was woefully obvious, including surveillance in an adjacent house where they tried to make the agents look like college students, except the college students didn't appear to go to school or work ever, and they were they were all at least in their 30s.
I wonder why that didn't
there was so much more. It was so funny. Like, good job, ATF. They also sent in an undercover agent who was discovered quickly, but Koresh never told him he was onto him. He just treated him like another cultist. The agent's name was Robert Rodriguez. They also went to his gun dealer, who let Koresh know and encouraged him to talk directly to him. In fact, the local sheriff, when he was being spoken to, was like, why don't you go, talk to him? Koresh offered to let them come out and check, and they didn't take him up on it. Like, they thought they were being super, super secret. And then, so the gun dealer got him on the phone and handed them the phone. He's like, well, come check.
Yeah.
And then they're like, no, you can't see us. We're invisible. I don't know what they were doing. During the time the situation with the weapons and ATF was brewing, the allegations about Koresh taking child brides and committing polygamy made it into a local newspaper, the Waco Tribune-Herald, which actually did a series on the situation entitled The Sinful Messiah. The first portion was published February 27th, 1993, and this would also kind of be a catalyst for what came next. Just 2 days before the series launched, Special Agent David Aguilera got the search and arrest warrants that would ultimately lead to a significant body count. It wasn't only the grenades that are in the warrants, but an ongoing set of reports of various problematic weapons purchases flowing in and out of a gun shop the Branch Davidians owned. In addition to the UPS, postal workers also reported weapons purchases to the sheriff. In a super simplified explanation, a person can get pieces from an M16, which is fully automatic, and replace parts of an AR-15, which is semi-automatic, in order to make the AR-15 fully automatic. They were purchasing these parts.
Okay.
You could legally purchase every part of an M16 except for one specific part.
Okay.
And so they were doing these things to stay under that line. These parts had been reported to the sheriff. There had also been noise complaints because they were firing. They were practicing with their weapons. But that was not illegal. Also, it's Texas. People are shooting. No shit. The ATF claimed that deliveries and intel showed there was possibly a meth lab on site, which was interesting because there had been one when Koresh and his people came back to take over the compound several years before, and Koresh had reported it to local law enforcement to have the involved folks removed. So I was like, would he or wouldn't he? Well, they never showed proof that there wasn't. Okay, so the ATF brought in the DEA and the DOD and got some minimal support from Fort Hood. Basically, training area and some items, The ATF had planned to execute the search warrant on March 1st, but the launch of the new series on Koresh's indiscretions forced them to bump it up to the 28th of February. They had tried to get the paper to hold the series, but when I was looking, it was so jumbled. But the best I could tell, there were a series of miscommunications, and the ATF kept changing the date, and the paper got confused, and they went. Because it was supposed to be like the 22nd at first, and they said, okay, we'll hold it. And then they kept moving it.
Yep.
And then they were just so.
And the paper
I'm
said,
not sure the paper
was.
I don't even know if they said fuck it or if they went, well, wasn't it supposed to happen on the 22nd? I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what I couldn't figure out from the jumble.
Gotcha.
Whether it was intentional if they said fuck you or whatever else. The morning of the 28th came and the problem started right away. A news reporter had received a tip that the raid was going to happen but got lost on the way to the compound, so stopped to ask a postman. That postman just so happened to be Koresh's brother-in-law. He did have one legal wife before he did all of this.
Wow.
Boom! The Branch Davidians knew the raid was coming. Koresh went to the plant.
Jesus Christ.
Koresh went to the plant, Rodriguez, and that's when Rodriguez found out he'd known about him the whole time, and he said, hey, I know about the raid. And he let Rodriguez leave.
Oh. Okay.
From reports after, it was claimed by survivors that Koresh gathered some of the males in the cult and told them to get armed up and take defensive positions. He then had the women take the children to their rooms and hide out there. His plan was to speak to the agents and see what direction it took. He said, I will let them lead where this goes. Like, he didn't say, we are going to shoot them all.
Right. They're not coming in.
And I feel that this is all important. Also that he let Rodriguez go.
Right.
What happened here gets murky. Much like the big question in Star Wars, no one can say for sure who shot first. The Branch Davidians claim it was the ATF. The ATF claims they heard gunshots inside the compound. Survivors from inside the compound maintain that the shots came from outside. There are plenty of theories, but no definite answers. What matters is that a full-on gunfight had started before the warrant could even be offered up. It was 9:30 a.m.
Oh.
Like, one of the theories, first, I didn't want to list them all, but one of the theories was they had dogs in a kennel outside, and apparently there were a group of cops that were set aside, not cops, ATF agents, who were set aside to go take the dogs out, and that perhaps it was them firing on the dogs.
Oh.
Which I was like, fuck you, they were in a kennel, just block access to it. Why'd you have to go kill them?
Yeah.
Contrary to popular belief, the cops that I know would rather not shoot a dog, but people sick them on them all the time. Anyway, this gunfight would last 2 full hours.
My God.
Yep, and it was the agents who ran out of ammo first. Several agents did penetrate the compound via the roof, and a cache of weapons was found, but the agents took heavy fire. A local sheriff did try to get a ceasefire once he knew what was happening, later claiming that he hadn't been notified of the raid at all.
Oh, that's a big no-no.
Mm-hmm. A ceasefire was called at about 11:30 a.m., and the Branch Davidians allowed the agents to come in to remove the 4 dead ATF agents and the 16 injured. 5 Branch Davidians were killed, 2 to be put out of their misery after serious woundings. Yeah.
Oh, God.
At about 5 p.m., the ATF shot a man trying to re-enter the compound. And then they said something about him having a gun or something, and it's like, okay. Because agents had been killed, the FBI was brought in now, and things only got worse. They established contact, but bear in mind that this was after a deadly onslaught of violence in which no warrant had yet been presented. The warrant never got presented.
Oh, God.
The head of the FBI's Hostage Rescue Team, or HRT, was the very man who had been in charge of blowing Ruby Ridge. Like, what does it take to get demoted when you lead to the murder of Ruby Ridge? Was like a big family survivalist thing, if I'm remembering right. There were 25 hostage negotiators in all, taking turns over the course of what turned out to be a 51-day siege.
Oh my God.
Koresh gave interviews to local press by phone and spoke to the hostage negotiators, but the FBI ultimately decided to cut their outside phone lines so they'd have no access to the press and only be able to talk to the FBI. They did not want him winning favor of locals. And
right.
Yeah. Negotiations were a roller coaster after this. Koresh would make an agreement, then go back on it because he would say the Lord had told him to do something different. So, like, he was going to come out, and then he was like, the Lord told me that I'm supposed to stay.
Lord says no.
Yes. On the flip side of that, it was problematic because the FBI was treating it like a hostage negotiation. There were no hostages. His people didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
It wasn't
they
like
were there voluntarily.
Jonestown or whatever. They believed in Koresh. They believed that this was the Armageddon that they'd been preparing for their whole lives. It was so poorly...
Yeah.
Completely, incorrect. They did get Koresh to send out 19 children from infant to pre-teenage, but this left at least 23 children still inside.
Oh, God.
In an interview with the FBI and Texas Rangers, the children reported incidents that sounded like child abuse, which would be used as further reason to continue the siege. Still inside were 98 people. Bible scholars were brought in. This is the smartest thing they did, except they wouldn't let them actually talk to Koresh. The scholars studied Koresh's teachings because there were plenty of recordings and videos that he'd done, trying to understand where he was coming from. In turn, they would go on talk radio shows, and they would kind of give a message to Koresh that way through the interviews. They were like, God would want you to do such and such,
Do we know that Koresh would listen to these?
He was listening, and he actually respected them. They wouldn't let, and he asked to speak directly to them, and the FBI said no. And I'm like, why the fuck don't you let him talk to him?
Yeah, that makes no sense.
There were also scholars of something called apocalypticism. Say that 5 times fast.
No.
Which focuses on the end times in the Bible.
Right.
But it's a whole branch of study. They told the FBI that what they were doing was only going to solidify that this was the end of times for the Branch Davidians, and that they were making it more likely the cult would do something dangerous and even deadly. The FBI ignored them. So I don't know why they consulted them in the first place.
If they were just
why bring in these various religious experts and then blow them off? One negotiator in a 2023 interview said Koresh had even preached to his people that the U.S. government would attack them one day and they would die in a fiery inferno. They knew the U.S. government was coming for them. They had planned for it. They figured it was their end of times.
This is just...
It was all so stupid. Dissension occurred within the FBI. Some wanted to make good on negotiations and thought that was the right answer, but others were frustrated and increasingly aggressive. These folks seemed to be winning, and various tortures were employed, such as blasting loud sounds all night to keep the people inside the complex from sleeping. Some of the things said they would play, it wasn't just music, but like the sound of jet engines and the sound of rabbits screaming during slaughter. And I was like, there were children in there that you were doing this to. At some point, power and water were cut to the compound. The cult had stockpiled MREs and had a single water tank that was still intact after the initial raid that had damaged their other 2. So they did have some rainwater in their MREs, and that's what they survived on. Again, they had been preparing for the end of the world. Koresh released 11 more people, and by released, I mean he ordered them out because they didn't want to go. He was like, they want me to release hostages, so you 11 have to go. They weren't hostages. Attorney General Janet Reno pressured Bill Clinton in going forward with a final strike. She said babies were being abused. He first tried to get her to wait them out, which had worked on a recent siege in Arkansas, but she argued that it was costing millions of dollars per day and that the cult could outlast them. She also brought up the chances of a mass suicide a la Jonestown, though Koresh had repeatedly told them he had no intentions of anything like that and that he would come out when he had finished writing a manuscript he was writing that would get his message out. He was batshit crazy, but...
but not homicidal.
April 19th, he had plenty of opportunities. They defended... There was an expert later, and they said there's 2 kinds of these apocalyptic cults, and one of them is purely defensive. Koresh's cult was a defensive cult. They did not go out intending to shoot people, kill people, whatever. They were willing to defend themselves.
Yes, they weren't trying to trigger the apocalypse.
Right. April 19th, 1993, the FBI went in. They used the military vehicles to break through the walls in several places. The military had given them vehicles. They were also driving over the cars. They drove over fresh graves that were out there because the Branch Davidians had buried their dead.
Right.
And they just kept driving over those graves to piss them off. I had edited a whole bunch of stuff out because this is already too long. So they used those military vehicles they've been given to break through the walls in several places and launch tear gas into the building. And there was actually like the tanks or whatnot was the launching mechanism for that. Over 2 days, they pumped in more and more tear gas. At this time, shots were fired from inside the complex, but the FBI did not return fire. I'm not clear if that was fired at them or, as you'll see, fired inside. The joke was on them anyways. The cult had a bunker and gas masks. Because why?
Of course.
Yes. Then came the fires. 3 fires started in different locations at around noon on April 19th. Some did escape and were rushed to local hospitals, but not many. Going in afterwards, they found the majority of the Branch Davidians in the bunker, either having suffocated from smoke or being buried under rubble from the building above them, because at one point the roof collapsed.
Oh, God.
And in fact, that's where the children were, so most of the... Yeah, a lot of the children died just from that rubble. So, by the way, that was from the agents' actions. Several people had been shot in what was thought to be mercy killings, including Koresh, shot right between the eye, right in the forehead there. It has never been definitively shown whether they set the fires themselves or if it was because of the weaponry being employed by the FBI. It was determined that they had ample opportunity to escape had they wanted to, though the building had collapsed over one escape tunnel. And I did see some articles mention that they thought that there were traces of kerosene, so that they'd set it themselves. I don't know. Nothing is definitive in this story. There's a lot being hidden.
I was going to say, is it really that hard to tell? I mean,
that's my thing. I was like, there are arson investigators whose entire job that is, and how do we not have a definitive answer?
Exactly.
Yeah. At least 76 people died, and some had that number at just shy of 100, but I saw 75, 76 as the most common number. No matter who started the fires or who shot first, both the ATF and FBI changed their tactics, and the siege is still being used as a teaching tool for what not to do.
Oh, okay.
If the claim is that they were trying to save children, it loses its power when considering how many children died because of their actions. Truly, this was a battle of wills between two groups of assholes who allowed innocent children to be hurt to get their way. He was an asshole, they were assholes, and it was a whole bunch of stupid-ass men having a little piss fight and measuring their penises. That's what this entire thing boils down for me. And all these people died because of it. There are still Branch Davidians to this day, and they tend to think that Koresh was right and that they'll see him when they die. As recently as 2018, a man named Charles Pace was running the new compound on the site, and while he is still teaching the end times and various conspiracies, he does say that Koresh's group was a cult because they thought he was God. So, new guy doesn't think he's the second coming.
Okay.
Sources.
He would be third at this point.
Yeah. People, Washington Post, ABC News, Time, and Wikipedia. So... yeah, I was equating this. I was like, he was a bad man.
Yes.
And something needed to be done about what he was doing to children.
Yes.
The adults.
And women.
What? No. Here's my thing. Those women had their own brains and they went along with it, so fuck them too. But what he was doing to children wasn't acceptable. I'm sorry. If you were that... no. The women were wrong too. Because they allowed their children to be treated that way. They were adults. They were not innocent victims.
Well, not all of the...
no, the little girls weren't, but those are still children.
Okay.
But I equated it, I was like, it's like saying there's weapons of mass destruction so that we can go in when we're actually wanting to go in to fight an oil war.
Yes.
That's what they did. They said, well, they have this weaponry.
What I couldn't fathom was the educated guy who was his second in command, who was married. And was like, okay, I'll give up my wife. You can have her. I'm like, you're right. At that point, it's like...
if my husband did that, then I'd be like, see ya.
Yeah, it'd be
then
like...
that's where it would end.
Yeah. That it doesn't...
no, and people were like, this was a highly intelligent man, but he couldn't think for himself.
No.
Whatever Koresh said, he did. And so, because I read a lot of the survivor stories too, but again... like, the entirety of this, if I wanted to go all the way back and then go all the way through all the stuff I left out and go through all the survivors' accounts and go through what's still happening with them today, I could do an entire podcast series just on this case, right? So that's why it was so long to begin with.
And probably someone is.
Probably, and they should be, because there were a lot of fuck-ups here.
Yeah.
And I think I removed it, but Janet Reno really pushed. She was brand new at the time. I think she was trying to make a name for herself. And she sure did.
Why would she push so?
She sure did. Because Clinton held out against her for a while. And he was saying, no, we could be into this peacefully. Because the one in Arkansas, they had no deadline. It was, all right, we'll just sit here and wait. And eventually you will run out of your shit, but we can still get supplies. This has been employed since forever.
Yes,
like,
since
back in the Wild West and way before. Romans.
Since we crawled out of the primordial
That's right.
ooze.
You wait them out. You cut off their supplies and you wait them out. And they were not a suicide cult. At no point had they intended to commit suicide. They were there thinking the end times were coming, being prepared for it. And if they were arming themselves for the end times and saving food, they weren't expecting to just go down until it was their time.
Yeah. And it's like, and what did you do? You brought the end times to them.
Right.
You came and shot them up.
And there were just so many things. It was a mess. So.
I mean, I remember hearing about it when it happened, but obviously the mists of time. What details I knew, I had forgotten, except for the lingering idea that
it was a cock up.
It was a giant cock up.
Yeah, that I did remember, but like I didn't just. There were better ways to go about it. There were more legitimate ways to go about it.
Yes.
And they had wanted to wait until he came off and just get him, like, when he did a run into town. The townspeople liked him.
Well, of course they did.
They actually had an understanding. This wasn't like the Rajneeshis where everybody hated them.
Right.
They actually, people, honestly, their beliefs weren't that far outside of a normal rural Texas town, you know? Like,
yeah.
So, and then like they had gotten misinformation that, oh, he rarely left. No, he left all the time. He'd go to town, he'd run errands, he'd do all sorts of shit. And so like that misinformation was a problem. But there were just so many things. And I love their stupid trying to be like undercover thing. We're college students.
Yeah. No. And the fact that he let the undercover guy go.
Right. Tells me that like he could have easily said he's my hostage.
Yeah.
And he did not. So that told me something. Again, I am not defending Koresh in any way, shape, or form. He was a fucking pervert, and I made a point of saying that. But at some point, like, where does the line where these are grown-ass adults following a crazy person? Where does the line come in where it's like, those adults shouldn't be able to think for themselves versus if they want to be in the cult, they should be in the cult, but their children shouldn't be forced to be in the cult.
Exactly.
And that's what should have been pursued.
And no, you can't have this amount of illegal weapons.
Right.
But it's Texas, and you can have all the legal weapons you want.
Yes. And well, and there's a lot of these cults, that survivalist cults, all sorts of things that hold these weapons, and we've seen what happens when there's a showdown like the Oregon one and stuff like that. Not a shot was fired on that. They destroyed this natural preserve like area. Not a shot was fired, and I'm thinking that's probably because of things like Waco and Ruby Ridge. But yeah, when do you step in and say, well, they've got enough armory to be a small army on their own? But I think that you should have to show intention. Just like with murder, you have to show intention that they plan to use those to go on the attack versus they're stockpiling them because they honestly think that the end of the world is coming and they'll need to defend themselves then. They had no desire to attack people. They weren't going to go into the nearby towns and attack them. There was no intention.
They had a good relationship with the town.
Right. So I'm like, there's a lot of lines here that are blurry.
Yeah. Now I know why it took you a while to get through that one.
And I had to cut it down. It was so much longer. And I was like, all right, editing time. But yeah, it was just a really fucked up. It was wrong in so many ways. Yeah. And it was mind blowing reading some of this stuff. Just, boy, poor decisions were made on so many sides.
I hope someone was held accountable for them.
I don't know. That guy probably went on to do the next.
Probably.
If they didn't take him away after a family post-apocalyptic folks was taken out. I do want to go look at Ruby Ridge now, so I'll probably do that as a future story because I really don't know that story well either.
I don't either.
It's one of those things that lives in the national zeitgeist, but nobody can necessarily say, here's exactly what happened.
I will look forward to that.
I figured I'd try and space out the cults a little bit since now this is the second one I've done.
Oh, and now I want to do one. We were talking about earlier.
We could do those in one episode. This is just the cult special. All right. Since we've run long, although not that long compared to what we used to do.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, and we'll talk at you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.